All right, let's just forget for a moment the Mallorca you might know, the one with the sparkling beaches and bustling resorts. I want you to picture an older island, a place of farmers, of ancient terraced hillsides, and vines reaching for that Mediterranean sun. Long before any hotels showed up, there were these dry stone walls and hands that knew the earth. And that's really where our story kicks off today. Because when you pour a glass of Mallorcan wine, you're not just pouring a beverage. Not at all. You're actually having a conversation with the island's memory. If you close your eyes, you can almost smell the sun-baked limestone, maybe a little hint of old olive oil, and just hear the echoes of all the people who have worked these hills for thousands of years. So that's the big question we're diving into. How does all of that, centuries of conquest, trade, devastating collapse, and then rebirth, how does all of that find its way into the bottle you might open tonight? Well, let's find out, starting from the very, very beginning. Winemaking didn't just show up on Mallorca with some grand announcement. It was much quieter than that. It kind of drifted in on the currents of ancient Mediterranean trade, long before anyone was really writing it all down. Okay, so what's really fascinating about this history is how each layer just builds right on top of the last. The Romans, when they arrive in 123 BC, they're the ones who give the vine a proper home, setting up organized planting. And get this, by the 1st century BC, the historian Pliny the Elder is already writing about how good Mallorcan wines are. Then, for centuries under Islamic rule, even though drinking alcohol wasn't encouraged, the farming knowledge just exploded. They introduced advanced irrigation and terracing, basically creating this incredibly resilient network of vineyards that was just waiting. So when the Christian reconquest happens in 1229 and wine becomes a big deal again for both the economy and the church, everything's already in place. It's a perfect example of how the island's entire story, even its conflicts, built the foundation for what was to come. So that foundation set the stage for the next few centuries, which were, well, they were anything but quiet. The island's entire fortune became tied to the vine, and that led to a period of incredible highs and absolutely crushing lows, a real roller coaster. Between the 14th and 18th centuries, wine became the island's liquid gold. Specifically, these sweet Malvasia wines were famous. We're talking exports to the royal courts of England, the Netherlands, Germany. For a small island, this was huge. Wine was the perfect high-value product, turning rocky soil into real wealth. And then came the 19th century boom. There was this tiny insect, Phylloxera, that was wiping out vineyards all over France. Suddenly, demand for Mallorcan wine just exploded. Farmers literally ripped out almond groves and grain fields to plant more vines. By 1891, the island hit its absolute peak, an incredible 30,000 hectares of vineyards. It must have seemed like the good times would never end. That the very same insect that created the boom, eventually it crossed the sea. When Phylloxera hit Mallorca in the 1890s, the collapse was brutal, and it was fast. Just look at this number. In about a decade, the vineyard area dropped by 90%. The industry wasn't just hurt, it was decimated. Families had to either leave the island or go back to planting the same crops they'd abandoned. Almonds, olives. The vineyards just fell silent. So for most of the 20th century, what little industry was left was just making bulk wine for locals and the new tourist boom. But out of that decline, a new vision started to take shape, led by a generation of winemakers who wanted to find the island's true, authentic taste again. And this table right here shows you that fundamental shift in thinking. The old way was all about bulk wine, focused on volume. The new vision, something completely different. It was about creating wines of place, moving away from international grapes that can grow anywhere, and instead recovering these indigenous varietals that could only really thrive right here. This wasn't just a trend, it was about reclaiming an identity. And the real heroes at the heart of this comeback are these native grapes. You've got Negro and Callet, which are kind of the soul of the red wines, giving them this amazing brightness and structure. Then there's Gorgollassa. Wow, this one was almost extinct. Bringing it back was like saving a piece of living history. And for the whites, you have Prensal Blanc, which makes these incredibly fresh, citrusy wines that honestly taste like the nearby sea. This whole return to quality was then locked in with official recognition, creating these designations of origin, or DOs, like Binissalem and Llevant. This wasn't just bureaucracy, it was a promise of quality, a way to protect the unique character of the island's terroir, and give this new wave of winemakers a solid foundation to build on. So, all of this brings us to the philosophy that really guides modern Mallorcan wine. It's not just about what's in your glass anymore. It's about the whole story, the whole feeling behind it.
It's a concept they call slow luxury. And the idea is that real value isn't measured by a price tag or how exclusive something is. It's measured by its connection to history, to a place, by its emotional resonance. A wine becomes a luxury not because it's expensive, but because it tells a deep, true story.
And that story is literally written on the land. The vineyards themselves are a kind of architecture. Those famous dry stone walls built with no mortar at all, they aren't just for looks. They define the terraces, they manage water, they radiate heat back to the vines at night. They are a physical record of generations of survival and clever adaptation.
So how do you actually experience this? Well, it's about turning a simple wine tasting into something more. It means walking through the old farm estates, the Finquas, seeing those terraces up close, hearing the story of a grape like Gorgollassa and how it went from near extinction to being in your glass. It's about really participating in the island's living history.
In the end, this quote just nails it. The story of Mallorcan wine isn't a straight line of progress. It's a cycle of resilience. It's this beautiful rhythm of expansion and collapse, of being forgotten and then patiently being rediscovered and returning. And that leaves us with a final thought to mull over. Whether it's a glass of wine, a piece of music, or an old family recipe, what hidden histories of collapse and return are waiting to be discovered there? What stories of resilience are pouring slowly, patiently into our own lives? All right,